Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. Could I have the roll call, please?
Mr. Ash, Mr. Fell, Mr. Fitch,
Here.
Mr. Hopkins,
Here.
Mr. Otto,
Here.
Mr. Pollock, Ms. Stake, Ms. Tompkins, and Ms. Fabian.
We do not have a quorum. What we're going to do is delay approval of the minutes since we can't take any formal action tonight, and then we'll move on to the plan case and hear your presentation, and if we have any questions, we'll run through those. The plan commissioners who aren't here will have a chance to view that, and we'll pick this up at the next meeting, and where hopefully we should have a quorum and be able to take action at that time. So I'll put off the minutes until next time, and then I will introduce plan cases 2202 PUD 13 and 2203 PUD 13. Request for preliminary and final approval for a residential mixed-use planned unit development at Clark Lindsay Village. Ms. Byrd.
And this is an additional phase of their original plan. So they have submitted both a preliminary and a final plan and would like them both considered together. And the application is actually for one portion of the undeveloped part of their lot, and it is for 16 townhouses in 4 one-story buildings that would each have 4 townhouses in them on the northeast portion of the property. The subject property is located at 101 West and 201 East Windsor Road. Here is the location. So this is Windsor Road and Race Street here, and this is the subject site. Just make that a little bit bigger. So on here is the existing Clark Lindsay Village, which is a continuing care retirement community. And this is the undeveloped part of their land. And what they're proposing now is up in this corner. So Clark Lindsay Village is, as I just said, a continuing care retirement community, which means that they have what is called aging in place. So they have different types of facilities, different types of residential facilities for different stages of elderly care. So they have independent living units, sheltered care units, and skilled care or nursing facilities. And it's on one campus under single ownership and single management. It was developed in, originally the preliminary approval for the PUD was developed in 1973 and was given approval for the entire site, a preliminary plan. And then the part that has been built now was approved in 1978. So they had a final approval for their first phase in 1978, and it was then built. According to the Urbana zoning ordinance, the section on planned unit developments, it does require review and approval of both a preliminary and a final PUD. And we are asking that you would consider both of them simultaneously. Basically, this is the preliminary approval for the whole site has expired, what was approved in 1973, but this is a very similar plan, and so basically it's a refreshing of that preliminary approval and then final approval for the part of the site that they are now proposing to build the townhouses on. So you have in your packet a list of the previous approvals. Plan case number 914 PUD 73 was the preliminary PUD approval in 1973, and we can actually take a look at what that was. So this was the original preliminary plan. So it's very similar to what was built. There were changes in the approval of the final Phase 1 final development plan, which is this section here. The building configuration is slightly different, but you can see here this winding road with townhouses goes down to a cul-de-sac here and then comes off Race and goes to another cul-de-sac here. So this was their preliminary site plan. And then this is part of Plan Case 959 PUD 75, which was approved in 1976, and this was final approval for Phase 1. Just shrink that a bit so you can see that better. So this is what was built, other than there was a change at some point. The parking lot is slightly different. But here are the buildings that were built. This was their Phase 1. This line right here was the Phase 1, and that is what was built. And then we have this section here, which is what they were at the time calling Phase 2. They did do a replat of the land so last year. So this is now Lot 1. These are actually separate lots, and this is Lot 2. And they're now proposing the 16 townhouses in this section, which is what they're now calling their Phase 1 of their future development. So there were some amendments to that original, the final Phase 1 approval. One of them had to do with parking. They removed some of the required parking spaces so that they could construct carports. And another was to do with a temporary structure being made into a permanent structure. And then there was an amendment in 1987, Plan Case 1252 PUD 87, that was amendment to expand and renovate the healthcare center, which is up here. So in that 1987 case, there is a memo in that plan case that did explain that the preliminary approval at that point for the entire site had lapsed. And so, which is why they're now applying for preliminary and final approval. There are a couple of differences between the previous approval and what they're asking for today, although the site plan is very similar to what they were originally asking for and were approved. The two primary differences, the number of units, they're now stating that there would be no greater than 80 units in all three phases of future development. So right now they're requesting permission to build 16, and they're stating that in all of this, what is now Lot 2, there would be a total of no more than 80 units. In the original preliminary plan, there were 84 units. And the other is the arrangement of the townhouse units. So this winding street has the townhouses directly off of it, and the current configuration that they are requesting is slightly different. It has the townhouses in groups going off into a larger area off of that main road, so they're not directly backing out onto that main private street. So if we go back to talk about the adjacent land uses. So here's the location. It is to the north of the subject site is a church use here, and single-family homes. And to the east and to the south is Meadowbrook Park. To the west, this is actually in the county. It is University of Illinois land. It's in agricultural use, and it is, but it's not within the city. And then kitty corner to it here, this is also the University of Illinois, but that is in the city, and it's also in agricultural use. The zoning, the surrounding zoning. So the zoning of the subject property, both lots, you can see there the configuration of the two different lots. Those are R5, R3, I'm sorry, it just looks like that because of the hatching on there. And then we have the CRE in the Meadowbrook Park. So CRE is Conservation, couldn't remember the C, sorry. Conservation, Recreation, and Education. So Meadowbrook Park and the University of Illinois' land, that's kitty corner up here. Those are both CRE. And then this is R3, and over here we have R2, single-family residential. Then we have the comprehensive plan. Make that a little bit bigger. So the comprehensive plan does identify the subject site, the entire site, as Clark-Lindsay Village, and has Meadowbrook Park surrounding it, has university land here, and this is a redevelopment site with the Orchard Downs site. This is low-density residential, and this is mixed residential suburban pattern. You have in your memo, starting on page 4, a list of the goals in the comprehensive plan that support the proposed planned use development, so tonight's applications. I won't read through those, but they are listed there. They're essentially, a lot of them are about infill development and development that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, promoting a balance of mixed uses in neighborhoods, encouraging compact, contiguous, and sustainable growth patterns. There's also a goal, a specific goal 19, which is to provide a strong housing supply to meet the needs of a diverse and growing community. And as we know, our community is aging in general, and so this would support that. Encourage the development of new planned neighborhoods, a focus on economic development. So this site does bring the city of Urbana property tax revenue, and retain and expand existing businesses. So the application is to build on this section of the site 16 townhouses. We'll just get to the elevation. So this is an elevation. This is what they would look like. The layout here. So this, they're calling this now phase 1 of future development, and they do identify on the site plan, which is in your packet, a future area for phase 2 and a future area for phase 3. They're not clear at this time exactly what that development would be, although they have committed to no more than 80 units being on those 2 sites combined, on the 3 sites, combined. But the community, the CCRC, continuing care retirement community concept is evolving, and so when they come around to development on those 2 sites, they will evaluate what type of facility is most needed. So this is what they're proposing this evening. So these are the townhouse units. So these are 1-story buildings. Each of these has 4 units in them. And it would also include, this right here exists, this is an existing 1-story garage. Right now there is a garage right here as well. That would have to be removed. And this street would be extended. It would be a private street, so it would be extended. For now, it would go only to here. So it would only go just south of the entrance into the second set of townhouses. But eventually it would continue through to Race Street. But they would be building the extension of the road during phases 2 and 3 of development. So concerning access, as we just saw, the vehicular access, right here they have a full entrance off of Windsor Road and would come in through here. These 8 units would be accessed here, and these 8 units would be accessed here, and then eventually a road would continue on. There are sidewalks planned on the road, on the side of the road. And both the city engineer and the fire department have reviewed and found acceptable this street layout, both for this current phase and for the future road layout for phases 2 and 3, that continuation of the road onto Race Street. You'll notice in the applications that it does mention an additional access off of Windsor, which they had originally shown on their site plan and requested, but it doesn't meet the access management guidelines that the city of Urbana has for arterials, and Windsor Road is a functional arterial. So they did remove that, and it would be accessed here. instead. There would eventually be another access off of Race Street, which is not a functional arterial, and so that would meet the guidelines. They would have to remove a parking garage right here, but the street will be wide enough to provide parking on one side of it, and so that will make up for the spaces that will be lost in removing the parking garage. So our PUD ordinance does have some specific goals that planned unit developments should meet, and they're listed in on page 6 of your packet. And the proposal this evening meets the following of those 9 goals. The first one is to encourage high-quality, non-traditional mixed-use development in areas identified in the comprehensive plan. The second is to promote infill development in a manner consistent with the surrounding area. The third is to promote flexibility in subdivision and development design where necessary. The fifth, it's the fifth goal, their fourth goal that they meet, to promote development that is significantly responsive to the goals, objectives, and future land uses of the Urbana Comprehensive Plan. And the seventh, to coordinate architectural styles, building forms, and building relationships within the development and the surrounding neighborhood. And then the eighth, to encourage the inclusion of a variety of public and private open space, recreational facilities, greenways, and trails not typically promoted by the zoning ordinance. The PUD is the proposed addition to the existing PUD. Appears to be a high-quality residential mixed-use infill development that will utilize flexible zoning standards to provide a development that is consistent with the surrounding area. So I'm sure all of you have been along the sidewalk or at least seen the edges of the existing Clark Lindsay Village. The landscaping is a very high quality and really extends the park-like atmosphere of Meadowbrook Park when walking along Windsor and also down Race as well. And it is anticipated that this future development would simply enhance that. For a PUD, according to Section 13-3 of the zoning ordinance, a PUD, there are certain requirements that a PUD must meet for it to be applicable. One of them is that it be at least 1/2 acre and that it meet one of 4 criteria outlined in the zoning ordinance. So this is almost 27 acres, and so it definitely meets the size criteria. And the 4 criteria are that it be mixed use, conservation, infill, and or unique development. And it actually does meet all 4 of those. So with mixed use, it is a campus layout, although the application before us this evening is for one type of living unit. This is a whole site, so it's a whole campus, and it has several different types of living units. It has the independent living, the basically apartments, and then it has some assisted living and nursing facilities. And this would add an additional type, the townhouse, which would give even more independence to the residents. Conservation, so as I talked about the Meadowbrook Park, they have done extensive landscaping, which benefits not only people on the site, but it also benefits people that use the Windsor Road and Race Street as a walking path. And there are quite a few people that will walk a circuit of Meadowbrook Park and then extend it around Clark Lindsay because of the landscaping. Infill development, so this is land that is within the developed limits of the city. It is connected to all utilities. And then unique development, and so this is a unique type of facility in our community, the CCRC concept of aging in place. This is a unique development. Permitted uses, residential uses are one of the permitted uses for PUDs, and all of the types of residential facilities provided and proposed in this PUD are permitted in the zoning ordinance. PUDs also have a section that allows some flexibility in the minimum development standards, and they're not actually applying for any variations from the minimum development standards. This land is zoned R3, And the maximum allowable building height in R3 is 35 feet. Their proposed buildings will be a maximum height of less than 21 feet. The maximum floor area ratio allowed in R3 is 0.40, and the existing FAR on the entire site is about 0.25. With this current proposed expansion, it would be approximately 0.29. And then with future expansion phases 2 and 3, although they don't know exactly what they'll be building, so it's hard to estimate, it would be roughly around 0.4. The minimum open space ratio allowed in R3 is 0.4. The current open space ratio is 0.71, and with the expansion proposed in this application, it would be 0.68. And then with the future expansion on phases 2 and 3, it would still be well above that 0.4. So, and the proposed plans meet all of the minimum required setbacks, so they're not actually asking for any of the minimum development standards to be varied. They're not asking for any waivers. So the criteria for approval for outlined in the zoning ordinance for planned unit developments, the first one is that the proposed development be conducive to the public convenience at that location. So this is already an existing planned unit development. It's an existing continuing care retirement community, and this would be an expansion of that. It is in line with their original proposal, which was approved in the 1970s. The second criteria is that the proposed development be designed, located, and proposed to be operated so that it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the surrounding areas or to the public welfare. And as this is an expansion of an existing development, it would not, in fact, be injurious or detrimental. The largest impact will be on this east side, Meadowbrook Park. Right now, when you're actually walking in the park, this is a multi-use trail. When you're walking in the park, this is all open. There are some trees in there, but it's mainly open grass, and so it does appear that the park extends further to the west onto Clark Lindsay's property. And so there will be an impact, but they have proposed landscaping on this side. They do have, the buildings are not going to be blank walls on that side facing the park. They have taken into account that side is facing the park in their building design. The third criteria is that it be consistent with the goals, objectives, and future land uses in the comprehensive plan and other relevant plans and policies. And so we have in your packet the list of goals in the comprehensive plan that I mentioned earlier that this development does support. The fourth criteria is that the proposed development be consistent with the purpose and goals of the PUD section in the zoning ordinance. And that, again, we listed earlier, goals 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 8. It is consistent with and supports. And the fifth criteria is that the proposed development be responsive to the relevant recommended design features identified in Table 13-2 in the zoning ordinance. And there's a long list of design features recommended for planned unit developments. You see in your memo some of the design features that have been incorporated, that we've identified that are incorporated into the plans. Those include the transition area, the lighting, the street lighting, access, internal connectivity, a landscape identity, tree preservation, street trees, open space provision, passive and active recreation, and architectural design. And there's a bit more detail in how the plans do meet those goals. So you have in your packet a list of staff findings, and then the options. We won't be voting this evening because we don't have a quorum, but when it does come time to vote, we will ask you to have two separate motions and consider the preliminary and the final as two separate applications and vote on both of them separately. There is a staff recommendation for approval for both, and with the condition that construction be in general conformance with the site plan as attached. And then we did intend to add a second condition, simply that we specify exactly what is being approved so that it is this section. And so for the next meeting, I'll write up language to include for a second condition that Simply in our earlier looking back at the cases from the 1970s, it's not exactly clear what was approved in which different phases. And so we just want to make sure that this is in fact clear that it is approving this and not the entire concept. It's just this phase right here, what they're calling phase 1 of this development. I would be happy to answer any questions. We do have the applicants, quite a few representatives for Clark Lindsey, the site designer, engineers, a lot of Clark Lindsey people who would also like to present to you, and I'm sure could answer other questions about the development.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. Any questions for Ms. Byrd? Danny?
On page 6, under the ordinance goals, number 8, to encourage the inclusion of a variety of public and private open space, recreational facilities, greenways, and trails. What would be accessible to the public on this?
So it is private property. Right now, there's a walking path connected to the Meadowbrook Park walking multi-use trail that's right here. There is a sign here that says this is private property. It is Clark Lindsey property, but it does not ask you not to stroll in that area. And these paths would remain. I'm sure the applicants can answer more directly whether or not they would be inviting of the guests to the park onto their property. But certainly the public sidewalk on the north side, which is landscaped, and then again on Race Street as well. But actually on the site, it is private property, and the street, the sidewalk system, they would remain private. They would not be public.
So just to clarify, the sign that I was going to draw to your attention is just for your information and is not intended to warn people off.
Not as far as I know. The applicant could maybe answer that better.
Okay.
Anything further? I have just two quick ones. Have you discussed this with the Park District? Have they weighed in with an opinion?
We have notified the Park District, but we have not heard from them. So
Okay.
they did receive a letter
Sure.
because they own property adjacent to it, and they have not contacted us about it.
Okay, great. The other thing is, just out of curiosity, what's up with the notch, the
Yeah.
conservation area that sticks in or sticks out, depending on
That was
your
bought with
perspective?
federal money, and so it is not, the Park District actually can't sell that. So it's simply
It'd be very difficult to incorporate it into the park anyway, you know.
right. I think the park, as I understand it, the Park District would be willing to sell it if they could, but because it was bought with federal money that had strings attached, they're not really able to, they're not even able to do a land swap with it. It would just be too difficult.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I did forget to mention, we did receive one letter
Yeah.
that you got a copy of this evening from David Wilson, who is opposed to it. He is unable to attend tonight because of the weather and not being well, but he says that he and his wife are strenuously opposed to this development project due to the visual and aesthetic disruption to the immediate area.
Mr. Myers?
I was just going to mention that I believe Clark Lindsey Village has had some communication with the Park District, and maybe they could maybe they could share what they learned at that time.
Mr. Hopkins?
This is sort of a comment, but I think we need to deal with the situation we have. In your specification of what we are approving, it seems to me we may want to think about specifying what we are approving as final and what we are approving as preliminary. Because my hunch is we want to approve as preliminary the general configuration of the roadways, not just the roadways that are in serving the 16 units.
Right, that is a good point. This, the reason that they, as I understand it, the reason that they included this extension on here is right now one of the utilities does not extend onto this part of the site, and so they had to show where the road is going to be because they're planning in where that utility is going to be. So the road is, in fact, I think that is the permanent location of the road. the application, the preliminary application, does just request approval for this section. We could talk to the applicant about the entire site. I don't know if that would require renoticing. We'd have to go back and look at the notice.
Oh, I thought it did. I guess my point is that the preliminary that stands for the rest of the site, if we approve as preliminary and final, only the northeast portion is the previous preliminary, which has a different road configuration.
The previous preliminary has lapsed. The approval has lapsed. In 1987, when they did that amendment that
Okay.
that
So
allowed.
we don't have the
Right.
legal problem.
Right.
So, okay, I understand the complications, but I just wanted to.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bird. Can I ask if anyone from the petitioner wants to address the commission?
Good evening. I'm Carl Weber, lawyer in Urbana, and thank you all for showing up on a snowy evening. Rebecca has taken most of my outline, you'll be happy to hear. And so I would like to, though, suggest that there are some people here who plan on at least answering your questions and mentioning a few things to you. Deb Reardons is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Clark Lindsey. She has tremendous experience both in the field and in the business. We're extremely fortunate to have her. We are also fortunate to have Jerry Wallach and Ramu Ramachandran from a very well-known national architectural firm who are very up on these types of facilities and have been working on this project with us for quite a while. Finally, Tom Burns, whom you no doubt know, has been the longtime chair of Clark Lindsey Village, and he will briefly mention something as well. Rebecca did a good job of suggesting what the CCRC concept is, and I would only add to that that there are particular advantages to CCRC that may not be as obvious. Oftentimes, a couple, such as my parents, would be residing in Clark Lindsey, and if one becomes ill, as did my father, he was in the nursing facility, and my mother could simply walk down the hall from their apartment, visit him as long as she wanted, and walk back. Quite a unique opportunity and a very successful residential concept. Not only is Clark Lindsey a good residential concept, but it is a good CCRC. Financially and physically, it is very well thought of and very well run. You may have noticed that I think maybe a year ago, the nursing home portion of Clark Lindsey Village was listed by U.S. News and World Report as the #1 nursing home in the state of Illinois. So we are fortunate to have this organization here, and I consider myself fortunate to work with them. You have heard much about what our plan is, and I need not speak any further about that except to mention that even in the years when Clark Lindsey might have had a pretty good argument that they didn't have to pay real estate taxes on at least a portion of their facility, they did. And they continue to, and they expect, obviously, that they'll be paying real estate taxes on this new addition. So it is a significant advantage and infill to our residential area. So I would just simply like to suggest that Deb will present a few details of the project. Ramu will talk about the design, and Tom will finish up with a review of the history and the merging of the current request. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate your being here.
Thank you. Mr. Weber, I think I forgot to ask you to sign in there if you could.
I did.
You did. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, I thought I did. I think I did. Thank you. I'm not very good at this.
You're doing great. Well, thank you very much. I'm Deb Reardons, and want to thank you all for your consideration of our project. On behalf of the Board of Directors and the residents of Clark Lindsay, we are very excited about this project. As Rebecca mentioned, we've been working on this for 35 years, so it's very, very excited to bring this to you tonight. I'm going to speak to why this is important to Clark Lindsay's future. If you recall, in the 70s, things were built a little smaller, and we found ourselves with a lot of small units, 160 of them overall. And through the years, as the market started to demand larger units, we started combining units to get larger units. And now we have 132 apartments. This expansion is a natural progression to bring us back to full capacity. And that's in part very important to Clark Lindsay's future, because as we have an ideal population, we're able to update our amenities and bring the very best programs to our residents and to the community at large. Also, because we've been here 35 years, we have some residents whose parents actually first moved in, and now they are there. And their needs and their wants are different from their parents. And their children are now joining our waiting list and planning for the future. And their needs and their wants are different. And the exciting part about the Villa project is that it freshens our campus, and it offers a new style that is different than what we've had. To some customers, not all, but to some, it'll offer the best of both worlds. The privacy of a villa-like home, but also the beginnings of a commitment to a community where they can participate, volunteer, and be supported throughout the years. Clark Lindsay's success, future success, the commitment we've made to all of our residents to take care of them for the rest of their lives, depends on us staying marketable and competitive. We are comprised of residents who have lived in Urbana their whole lives, and we also attract quite a few residents from all over the nation coming to live here and retire here close to family. And in order to continue to do that, the villas are an important part of our master plan to keep us fresh, keep us competitive, and keep bringing the amenities and the programs people have come to expect. Just to questions that kind of hang open, I thought I could answer real quick for you. The sign at the Meadowbrook Park entrance is not meant to keep people out. It is meant to keep dogs on leashes and rollerbladers and fast-moving wheels off the sidewalks. But pedestrians have and are welcome to tour our campus, and that has been the case for a long time. So I hope that answers the question for you. So I'm going to leave the details, walk through the site plan to our very capable architect, Ramu, and ask that he come up. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to sign in and state your name.
Thank you. I've already signed in.
All right, thanks.
Very happy to be here. I'm honored to be here and present the rest of our team at this August assembly. My name is Ramu Ramachandran. I'm an architect. I'm here from Chicago. I represent a team of outstanding professionals that are with me that I'd like to take 1 second to introduce to you. We have with me the leader of our design team, Jerry Wallach from Perkins Eastman, as well as Jason Om, my colleague. We've all, as architects, been working together for over 10 years and have I'm proud to say, some great buildings around the country to our credit. And we've had an opportunity to work with outstanding clients, and Clark Lindsey is one of our best. And having said that, I'd like to also introduce to you another team of outstanding professionals that are here this evening supporting us in this effort: civil engineers, landscape architects, and traffic engineers. I'd like to introduce to you Mike Renner of Erickson Engineers. I'd like to introduce to you Steve Corcoran of Erickson Engineers once again. Mike's our principal civil engineer, and Steve is our traffic consultant. And I also have here Steve Conters of the Hitchcock Design Group, our landscape architects. A wonderful team of people that we've worked with on numerous projects in the past. Also want to mention, just take a second to mention here that a few weeks ago at the annual meeting of the Illinois Parks and Recreational Association, Mike Renner volunteers a lot of his time as commissioner for Park District, and he was chosen as the Park District Commissioner of the Year at the Parks and Recreation Association. We have a great team of very responsible designers that are behind us on this project. This is a great opportunity for us to create an addition to the existing community at Clark Lindsey. We understand the very rich history that Clark Lindsey has in the city of Urbana. They've been great neighbors to the Meadowbrook Park, and just absolutely wonderful stewards, if I may say so, of the land that they've been on for the last 30 years. The existing landscape design and the care of the land is outstanding. Anybody who's walked by Meadowbrook Park, as numerous of the people that I've mentioned here, would notice the care that they give to their land on a day-to-day basis. With all this said, I'd like to let you know that we have some boards that are on display here. If I may, am I allowed to stand up and go across? Okay, all right, that's okay. The first board shows you the similarity between what is being proposed today to what was originally approved on the property. We believe that what we are proposing to add here is, in terms of the villa units, the most appropriate addition that could be possible to this campus in terms of being a neighbor to Meadowbrook Park, and in terms of just adding to this very community. The height and the scale and the openness that this particular layout affords, we thought would be the most important contribution that these buildings could make to the park edge, as we call it. It could very easily have been a set of villas that are oriented the other way, which would have created a wall between the park and the community. And what we've done here is oriented it in such a way that the fingers of land extend into the development, therefore allowing our landscape designers to continue to weave a natural edge between the park and Clark Lindsey property, which we believe is one of the most important contributors to keeping a continuity of that edge and of the character that is there today. It'll help us maintain it. We've been very respectful of Meadowbrook Park. We consider that the kinds of materials that are proposed to be used on this addition would be a more natural masonry and materials that carry the look and feel of wood, in terms of actually wood timbers, as well as masonry materials that carry the texturing of wood planks. We believe this would be the best way to continue to maintain a residential character of these one-story buildings. We've also taken care to ensure that shingles on the roof ridges and a variety of heights along the roof ridges break down the possible monotony of a villa building. And by breaking down the scale, which you can see in those elevations with the cross ridges and elements such as that, and with masonry chimneys, it lends to a very residential character that could be associated with each unit within the townhouse as being its own individual residence. With all this said, I'd like to share with you that the kind of concerns that Clark Lindsey has expressed to us as their designers as criteria for the design of these buildings are very similar to the kinds of concerns that any of the residential neighbors might feel. And so there's a shared set of concerns here in terms of creating an addition that has a residential character, that is set back possibly as far as we can from the Windsor Road. As you can observe here, the little a piece of land of the park district that pokes into the property definitely does create a restriction into what can be added on the northeast corner of Clark Lindsay. And so we've been able to create a landscape berm and add some trees on the tree line at Windsor. There's already a very natural edge along Windsor Road that gives Clark Lindsay a very a friendly feel, and we continue to maintain that edge on Windsor. With that said, I believe, just trying to see here if there's any other thoughts that I wanted to share here. I think the residential character and sharing of the concerns is what I wanted to bring up as the most important points. With this, I'd like to conclude my presentation, and I'll call upon Tom Burns, Chairman of the Board, unless you have questions.
Any questions? Because I think I do. Mr. Otto?
Go ahead first if you want.
Okay. I'm looking at Exhibit E, the elevations, and I just want to say I appreciate the side view rather than the massive frontage against the park. Which one of these side views would face the park? The one with the cutouts, so to speak. Okay.
So it's the narrow face that looks down the park. The units have windows that allow them to enjoy the park face as well. So.
Okay. Mr. Otto?
Yeah. I'm curious why you went away from the original profile of the street and the layout of the homes. It seems to me, I'm just estimating, the amount of paving that has to be done with this configuration is going to be increased. And there is a kind of straight line effect there immediately adjacent to the park. I mean, as the house goes, the end of that house is attractive, but it strikes me that, and I'm not an architect or an esthetician, but I'm trying to think through. It's a park I use a lot, and which is going to be more obtrusive, having, maybe units at a slight angle to the path that goes by, and the way in the original configuration, or this sort of monolithic set of buildings which may continue on. It's not really clear what happens after this. So why did you go away from the original design, which is more organic and perhaps has less actual paved area in order to accommodate the cars?
Absolutely. You like to take a shot?
Well, no, I'm going to come join you, but.
Okay. This is Jerry Wallach, leader of our design team. One of the most important things that we wanted to do for Clark Lindsay is continue to be able to lay out and master plan the developments to allow them to continue to grow and continue to, I guess, upgrade buildings as buildings age. Buildings have a natural age to them. The existing buildings on the campus are over 30 years old. The units are smaller than what we would currently see across the nation. And so eventually we do believe that as and when developments continue to happen along the Windsor Street edge, in terms of there's a row of garages that have already been built. And so we were not wanting to take down the existing parking capacity on the campus. And so we had to respect the row of garages as we come across and make a turn. And because of, as we mentioned, the little piece of land that juts into the property, we wanted to ensure that we are able to build in phases in terms of units at a time, and shape the road in such a way as to allow what is shown as a layout.
I'm going to help you out here too, because this was there was a lot of discussion on this sort of as we planned this, but you'll notice we also have the existing building that's already there, that if you're in that building and you're up on the upper floors, you have a very long view over to the park. Sorry. So I'm going to grab this quickly and then come back to the microphone so I can point, because it's a good question. We did spend a lot of time on this. So you also have these units here who have a view to the park right now. And if you look at the existing plan, the way those houses are laid out, that actually forms a wall to the park from the existing residents in the building. Whereas if you start to turn these buildings sideways, you're creating view corridors through to the park. So you start to allow sort of almost a funneling of the views sort of through here and don't put the long elevations sort of to the building. The other thing that you get here, if you notice, it's almost like the haves or have-nots. If you're on that set of townhomes in that plan, you've got some nice views out your back towards the park. If you're on the other side of the street in the other townhomes, you're just looking at the townhomes that have the views of the park. So by this layout here, you do get the angled views where everybody can actually start to appreciate the views out of their windows to the park also. So we're protecting a little bit of the views from the residents. We're sort of giving everybody views out because nobody looks straight out a window. You're always kind of looking at an angle. I think the other thing as you look at that is anybody who's driving down this road goes by every single townhouse. So your traffic on that road actually is increased because every resident is using that. So you're right, we are increasing a little bit on the pavement there, but now as people do come down this road, they're not actually driving by your sort of front door all the time or your front windows all the time. So this creates more of a pocket neighborhood, which has a little bit more privacy. So a lot of those sort of different things came into our consideration, which why we thought this was a better sort of layout. I think the other thing that Ramu started to do is that you never know what's going to happen in the future over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years in sort of the layout of these buildings, and kind of allowing the flexibility for what may happen sort of further in the site also was one of the considerations that we gave. So a lot of different factors. Is that?
It explains your thinking on it, but the letter that we received here, one of the things that's changed in the last 30 years is the creation of Meadowbrook Park, which is one of the most popular parks in the region. It's heavily used. People feel very possessive about it. And I think you'll get a lot of resistance from the kind of straight line that I know you've got some shrubs there, but you're very close there. All of the development there is very close to the existing trail. And I shouldn't be surprised if you get more comments along the lines of the letter that we got tonight, where the original design, it veers away. It doesn't present a kind of geometric. So you're thinking about it from the perspective of the Clark Lindsay residents, and we have to raise questions in terms of the community. And that path there, I use it myself. It's very heavily used beginning at, I get out there sometimes 6:30 in the morning. So
I think
the effect of the appearance of that on the park users, I think needs to be considered.
Well, and I think, again, part of that there, when you're just having the end of the building, is you're really kind of minimizing sort of the amount of building that is facing the park. So trying to sort of, and it is a one-story building, very much like a single-family residence. And then the park is very beautiful in the landscaping as it sort of filters into the site. So the idea that our landscape architects have actually brought in the natural prairie plantings to just sort of weave back and forth into our site, so that you're going to have a hard time, we believe, understanding where the park really ends and where Clark Lindsay begins once the landscaping takes full root. We understand the beauty. We tried hard to sort of accomplish sort of a collaboration between the park and Clark Lindsay in the expansion of their campus.
That do it?
Yeah.
I just have one further, Mr. Hopkins?
Go ahead.
Oh, one further, just so I understand. These will sit 9 feet higher than the park? Is that correct, from looking at the elevations? I mean, yeah, the way you have this designed here on, again, back to the one that you showed me there, there's a 9 feet of banking, so you're going to build the land up 9 feet from the. So again, just to understand what's it going to look like on the trail when you're walking by. Not only is there going to be a building, but an additional 9 feet of banking, which would put the peak at 21 to 25 feet, rather than, 31, over 30 feet.
Okay. No, that 9, just to clarify the
That's
9.
not right.
That's a basement.
Yes, exactly.
That's
exactly.
Okay.
So the basement can view out.
Okay, great.
So that's not a berm.
That's not a berm.
He's exactly right.
Okay, good.
That 9
Yeah.
foot is the height of the basement foundation wall on the inside. And what that image is really trying to tell us is, in terms of the contours, there's about a 4.5 to 5 foot gentle drop off of the land as it heads towards. and we had to create a pad. So from a universal design and accessibility standpoint, we wanted to make sure that people are able to, older adults are able to park their cars and walk into their apartments without too much trouble. And so the land difference that you might see at maximum would be between 4.5 and 5 feet as it grades away from the park towards the central area. The other thing that we wanted to, as
Question, which way is the grade? Is it
It's going uphill.
going uphill to?
Yeah.
yes, let me bring over the landscape design and then I can show you. So, so the land gently falls from here towards the park's edge, and we've eased the transition in terms of the roadway, and we've bermed this up, and this is this kind of planting allows the weaving of the park landscape and the natural landscape at Clark Lindsay to actually try to connect with each other visually. And so there's a gentle fall off on the central meridian as you approach the park edge.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Hopkins.
Okay, are you done? or-
I am, yeah. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with the same question. The elevation shows, I'm trying to figure out, is that a full height basement visible, or is that a partial window well?
It's a partial window.
Oh, okay. So the grade difference at the bottom of that from the floor level is,
So you're talking about the grade difference from there
Yeah.
up to the bottom of the?
yeah, right.
Okay, yeah, I'd expect it to be about between 5 and 6 feet.
Okay. Oh, and the drop, I mean, we don't have a contour map that goes all the way into the park, but the drop to the park is not 6 feet,
The drop to the park
to
is,
the walkway.
right,
So you've got water draining into that window.
into here.
Yeah.
Okay, from the side berms you're talking about?
I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't see how you can go down 6 feet and have that land draining to the park, given what I see on the contour map of where the path is in the park.
Okay.
And maybe I'm missing something, I don't know, but I'm trying to figure out what actually is the experience between the park and the housing in terms of who's where, above, below? Am I looking down into these people's full facade 5 windows from the trail as I walk by?
As you walk by from the park, you would, Jerry, go down to that one.
Okay.
So as you walk by from the park,
You want to get on the microphone?
on the microphone, sure. Then pull that over.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've got this in front of me, I just losing track of order here.
Sort of what happens with those lower.
Right. Yeah. So the distance between the edges of the buildings and the park boundary slopes back towards the, at the low point, sorry about that. At the low point, right there outside the windows,
Yes,
the land continues on its existing grade towards the park. It gently falls off in a dimension of about, this dimension across of about, it falls off about 4.5 to 5 feet from where the new roadway is, all the way up to the park edge. From the new roadway to the park edge, about 4.5 to 5 feet. So what we are having to do to
your contour map is a 1 foot or 1 meter?
pull out our civil drawing here.
It's got to be 1 foot because that's.
Yeah, right. I mean, your contour map that I read does not agree with the statement you're making, and I don't know whether I'm misreading your map or misunderstanding what's going on.
All right. Mic here as well. each of these being 1 foot of contour. These contour lines are 1 foot apart each. And so that's starting from here, it's very gentle across this portion, and then it falls 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 feet as it.
Yeah, but that window is at the end, not in the middle.
That's right.
The window is on the last easternmost unit.
Exactly.
And if I go to the southern set, and I look at the contours for as many as you've given me, it's actually not sloping down, and because I know the trail well, the trail actually is going up there. So I don't know how the southeasternmost unit, if it has that cross-section, is a drainage inlet.
We can go over some numbers if you want.
I mean, if you
Sure. Let's
I'm
try
assuming you've
this
done it.
approach. If Mike Renner with Erickson Engineering, civil engineer.
yeah,
If we start with the finished floor elevation of 736, and that's, do you have the civil proposed site plan C-1, which
Yep.
is in your packet?
okay,
So on that southernmost quad, it shows a finished floor of 736.
okay,
All right, are you with me?
Yeah.
You see where it says? The contour that is on the east side of that building is the existing contour is 732. 731 and a half. somewhere
so you
between-
are building up,
So the finished floor,
is actually,
Of-
is on a pad. This goes back to the earlier question. You're
Right.
actually building up from the existing contours.
so the average, but I'm just talking about the east side. If you take the
Yeah.
average elevation of that building, the existing average elevation is 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. That would be the dark contour that splits the building in half.
Yeah,
Okay? So effectively, you're falling
Okay.
734, 733,
I get
732. You're falling
the end
east.
building is actually up. And this goes back to the question asked
By the
before.
time it's on the eastern face of the building, it's up elevated because the grade is falling off.
Right, so that works because the floor level is 5 feet above existing grade.
Well, it depends on where you look at the building because the grade is pitching from west to east.
No, I know, but the grade at the point where the
Yes.
east wall is
It's,
of the first floor is built up 5 feet. Because 731 is the contour at the end of the line and 736 is the floor, right?
I suppose it's a matter of semantics. What we're trying to do is we're trying to balance the elevation across the
You're
building.
doing cut and fill and
Yeah.
coming out even, which
Right.
is efficient, I understand
Okay,
that.
okay.
But I'm just trying to say what's happening at that elevation.
At that-
So-
that
okay,
side of the
now I
building.
understand how I can walk by the trail and
Right.
what I'm going to see. Okay. I've got other,
Please continue.
okay. It seems to me that the main thing that became an issue between your initial application and now is the configuration of the roadway, because you lost your second entrance exit. And if I understand what you've done, you've reconfigured from the initial application to now and shifted the roadway that goes in front of the garages 15 feet south, 20 feet south, so that when I back out of the garage, and actually I should have already said this because it could be considered a conflict of interest. My mother-in-law lives in Clark Lindsay, so I've backed out of one of those garages. So that if I back out of one of those garages, I'm actually fully outside before the back of my car reaches the roadway lanes in either direction. And that's what you've done.
The intent was exactly to be safer. I mean, if you have-
Okay, because it wasn't, in the initial worded application, you hadn't dealt with that problem. When I look at this, the revision, it looks like that's what you've done.
Right. The intent there was to provide a safer experience for somebody coming out there, exactly like you said.
Okay,
So as the car is coming out of the garage, they're well and clear, visible to others who are driving down the road, so you're not backing into traffic.
right, okay. And we have had the emergency vehicle turnaround question is been dealt with. Is that, I mean, you said it had.
The fire department has said that because they're able to access all of the units while still going forward, they're okay with that. They would then have to go to the stub and reverse to turn around to get out. But as long as they can access all of the units going forward,
Okay.
they're okay with it.
And they can turn around with no turnaround. Okay. So. Yeah, but they're willing to back up because they can
Right.
get to all the foot. So, the roadway configuration problem, and this is related to what you had initially in the question of what's the preliminary approval and what's the final approval. You're asking as part of this to retain the approval for 80 units. And I understand that the way this works is you don't specify exactly what those units are until you've figured out what the market is at the point you're in. I fully understand that. But in order to think about approving 80 units, it seems to me we ought to have at least one, and preferably one apartment-like configuration, one villa-like configuration, or some partial thing that we know is feasible given the commitment we've made to the road pattern that we're approving now. And so I'm wondering what those are, because they're not obvious to me. Yeah.
Our discussion of 80 was not to ask that you approve 80 today. We actually brought up the number 80 because we were, as you suggested, looking at another curb cut. And we wanted to assist Public Works in their review of the question so that they might know what the maximum number of units would be. So it did not, it was not meant to be even a commitment to a maximum or a minimum. It was meant to be connected to the second curb cut. In fact, both management and designer suggest that they're not worried about a limitation of 80. But it is not a request for a permission for 80. We don't know what that is going to be until we see what's going to happen here.
But okay, I guess my question is, if I build a phased development, okay, then I'm trying to think at what level of detail do I have to design phase one? But I'm designing phase one, hoping not to have to knock it down in order to design phase two. So in doing that, at some other level of detail, in an uncertain market like this one, ideally I want to imagine 2 or 3 scenarios of what makes sense. And it seems to me that to a certain extent we're agreeing to approve a road configuration that does not make sense until it's complete. And it therefore seems that we ought to be at least somewhat aware. I mean, is there a notion that more villas can be built? Or is there a notion that more apartments can be built? Or either or? Does this road configuration work if you want to add apartments? Does it work if you want to add villas? It strikes me that scheme gives you more options for more villas. I don't see on this plan how you could replicate what you're building now again on the site because you've left no building site on the site of a size sufficient to do this. And you've essentially chopped up your site in a way that I think precludes some of the options I would be thinking about of how to justify this roadway and make it work.
We do have an alternative, of course, and that is to simply not request that this be a PUD and request that it be a subdivision, in which case we have much more flexibility. But that has not been what was requested by staff, and so we've taken this approach. In fact, if we had a subdivision, we probably would have a right to a curb cut on Windsor. So we're trying to stay within the requests of staff. Now, I understand what your question is, but we can go forever trying to guess what it might be. We are willing to limit ourselves to something that will work with what we have now designed. So granted, we come to you the next time, it's gonna have to fit. We know that.
Yeah, but so I'm guessing that the designers have at least thought about this.
I see where you're going, and the fact is, you do a road without consideration to what could happen in the future. And I think that right now, everybody's comfortable with the 16 units as they're designed, and there has been consideration given to potential possibilities for how the road and future expansion of more villas or products could work with the road. Is that?
Well, but I guess what I'm wondering is, what are those? Because they're not obvious to me. I don't see how you can get villas in the courtyard you left to the west. I don't see how you can get them to the south. I don't see how you can get them to the southeast, given the road alignment you've chosen. And once you do these, I don't see many other road alignments. And I grant you, certain things would be different with a curb cut, but that wouldn't actually change the road alignment. It would just improve your access at the parking. And that, I understand that piece of it, but.
It would just mean we can do it as we wish.
No, you'd still have to get subdivision approval because you've only got one lot.
But all we have to do is conform to the subdivision ordinance, and so long as we conform to the subdivision ordinance, it's approved. That's not what we're intending to do.
No,
What we're
I
intending
understand
to do
that.
is to try to prepare something that we think is good for Clark Lindsay and also good for the city.
Look, maybe I need to explain myself. I've got a background in planning landscape architecture and part of architecture, and I know this place pretty well. I'm not opposed to it at all. What I'm trying to do actually is think through phase 2 and whether phase 1 is being built in a way that phase 2 is going to be good, because phase 2 is probably the one I'm going to be living in. And it's not clear to me that it's thought through well.
I appreciate your question. We are very focused on the long term. I think why we don't have specific answers for you is because the options are varied. It really will depend. You've mentioned more villas, you've mentioned more apartments, and apartment buildings. Those are all options that could fit on this site as the road is configured now.
And you've checked that out.
And we have spent time as a board considering those options.
Okay.
At this point, it would be too premature to share that in a detailed plan because we don't know how we're going to react, how the market's going to react to this product.
Right, and I'm not asking for
No, I
a
understand.
plan. I'm
I
specifically
understand.
asking not for it that way.
But we are very concerned about being able to be flexible. That was
Okay. So
Yeah.
can you describe one of the ways that you could build more villas?
May I add a couple of
Remember-
Look at this existing site plan. On so if one were to Lindsay actually has numerous constraints that limit what could possibly be done.
Yes.
They have a beautiful, magnificent garden here that they've built with the University of Illinois collaboration that residents are very proud of. Obviously, we could curve the road a little south of here, but you'd not want to build something too close to it. There is an existing detention area. It's a dry basin right now. It doesn't get too wet, and you naturally want the road to be further away from there. Depending on whatever we do in phase 2, we want to piggyback on this basin. And I'll stay. Okay, if you want to piggyback on the basin, you don't want the road coming too close to the basin because you limit any future development, whatever it be. The third issue here is one of the reasons why the fire department is comfortable with this arrangement is because currently they have a little walking path that also doubles up as a fire department access road.
Yeah.
So
That's a vehicle access.
That's a
road,
vehicle
so,
access.
yeah.
So you can't eliminate the vehicle access. If you want to keep a road connected a race that the fire department and water mains and everybody was very much in support of is continuity of this road all the way to race.
Yes.
To make that happen, if you do anything to move this road southward, you seriously limit the possibility of development depth on the southern corridor.
Right.
And so it naturally happens that the best option for this road is to pick up as north as possible, as comfortable to overlap with the existing fire department access so it doesn't seem like you're adding more
Okay.
impervious into this area. You want to stay a little away from the basin, but not to allow too much development on this corner. Clark Lindsay has desires for, say, eventually wanting to create more paths, gardens, and connectivity between the villas and the
Right.
amenities in the central area here. So we need to allow ourselves a little flexibility in terms of what we want to do on this corner. If there is, now to answer your question in more specificity, if there is a desire for more, let's say future demand resulted in desire for just a few more villas,
Yeah, okay.
you could continue to follow that concept. And let's say we discuss that just for the purpose of a discussion, that a future development of this wing, let's say maybe 20, 30, or 40 years in the future, you want to have a wing. The desires for people are for larger apartments. People have felt that the apartments are a little smaller. You want to increase the depth of this building to allow for. You have choice of extending this way or this. And let's say for just a second, the discussion says extend it towards the central turnaround. So you retain this area. You could continue to add villas more, not in the townhouse format, but like in a duplex format. You could add villas, just for the purpose of a discussion. You could continue to add villas along the internal corridors, and here, where we have a fourplex, you could end up with a triplex. If Clark Lindsay decides or so chooses that there are much more, the trend in nursing home design, nursing facility design, has tended towards much more residential-like facilities. We've done a few in Danville. Those are called greenhouses or a small house model, which feels more like a household of 10 people in a much more residential setting than in an institutional setting. So the depth we would have to study to allow, this could potentially allow for a healthcare
And you've got
related.
the depth there to do something like that.
Yeah, you might have to allow enough depth on the southern border to allow a more a healthcare model that could be fit there. So our job as an architect in this case was because Clark Lindsay is not comfortable as a client, and I believe no client would be looking too far in the future and saying, I want apartments here or I want healthcare there. So, we were just saying, what could this depth allow us to do? And as long as we were sure that either a triplex or a future healthcare option could be built there, we said, okay, that's a safe enough decision for
Okay,
now.
so you've looked at that depth. You
Yep.
think you could build triplexes. You think you could build 10-person houses.
Right.
You think you could
Yeah.
build
We wouldn't even
apartment.
be worried about this road had the gas people told us that they don't have gas feeders on that road, but they have it here. So we
Yeah.
need to give them an easement right away. So they need to bring the gas along from Race. And so
Right,
now
so
I
you
need
need to fix the road
I got to
now.
fix the road geometry so we can
Right,
give them an
okay.
easement. And that's
So
really
the road
what
is fixed.
Yeah.
When this gets constructed, it'll be fixed by a
And
gas
the,
main.
the only positive is that the gas pipe is a 2-inch piece of plastic. And so,
Yeah, okay,
so
but you
if
hope
I have
it's
to move it,
fixed.
I'll move it. So.
And what about to the southeast, between the road and the basin?
Right, in this zone.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
have you got the depth and the grade there to put anything there?
Right now, the basin has some spare capacity.
Okay.
Like when it was done in the 70s, it was actually done with actually some significant spare capacity. So we have to look at carefully.
Well,
those-
you're increasing the demand now.
Yeah.
But-
And we believe that, if just purely the villas here might actually fall within the existing spare capacity, and
Okay.
we're going through all those calculations.
But that means
there.
it's unlikely in the future you're going to be able to make it smaller, because as you add anything more than what you've got now, you're going to need that basin.
Right, unless we hold a little more water, more, more progressive water management principles rather than
Yeah, okay.
than just, take it
Okay.
in the catch basin.
That helps a
Helps,
lot.
okay?
Yeah.
Just to let you know, one of the things in the landscape plan is actually, we're getting into that level of detail here, but there are some excellent water management ideas to slow the water down and put some native planting as you slow it down as it gets closer to catch basins, to detain it local to the homes before you
Right.
get it into the basement, and so there's some,
Right.
there's some thinking in the process.
Are you using any pervious pavement in the cul-de-sacs?
We have to be careful about that because think about the
Hard-
population.
hard
that
to
we're
walk
working with.
on,
And,
yeah.
I think some of the things that we haven't talked about is sort
Yeah.
of the unit designs being universal design, all 2 bedrooms, all adaptable, accessible bathrooms.
Yeah, yeah.
We have to make sure all the grading, you wonder why we're keeping things level.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever
No.
seen somebody get out of a car on a cross slope with a walker?
Yeah.
Very
I-
difficult. So there's a whole
Every
bunch-
other day.
there's a whole bunch of other things that we haven't even talked about that have gone into the design of the pavement that has to be accessible. Any little bump in a pavement, if you see somebody with a walker, becomes just a huge boulder. And so even how you sort of get from the driveway to the front porch in the house has to be zero, a zero entry.
Actually, that raises another question. At the moment in your landscape plan, you have no access from the southern cul-de-sac to the building without going around to the north. Is that just because it's outside the scope of the project, or?
Oh, you're talking about pedestrian access from here out to Clark Lindsay?
Yeah.
Okay, we are still thinking about where the connector paths need to
Right,
happen.
because there are there are grade doors on the other side. So if
Right.
I was living in one of those, there's no way I'd follow the
Yeah.
current
Right,
sidewalk
yeah.
pattern to get into the
Yeah,
You're
building.
saying from the backside, sort of out.
No,
No, he's
well,
talking about from here
the
into
southern
the building.
cul-de-sac, there's,
Just here.
I can't remember whether the door's on the east side of the south end or on the south end
That's right.
to get in.
Yep.
But that's the way you're going to go in, and you currently don't have a
And we'll
walkway.
keep that in mind, and that's
Yeah.
part of our,
Yeah,
as the
okay.
design progresses.
And that's beyond what we need to worry about in terms
Yeah.
of, in general, compliance with the site plan. I'm not too worried about it, but it's the big stuff.
These are all very good points, so appreciate your,
Okay, I think that's all I got.
Thank you, gentlemen.
thank you so much.
Mr. Burns.
Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you folks about something that you folks may appreciate that's important to my life. I've been on the board of Clark Lindsay Village since 1979, served as the chairman of the board 32 years. My predecessor was only Charlie Zipro, there's only been 2 of us. He and I, we care about Clark Lindsay Village, and on the other hand, we care about the Park District adjacent to us. One of the things that we've Did I not push? I just walked up. I'm sorry. Here I am. The process we made to meet extensively with the Urbana Park District staff. This is not in the vacuum of the world. They've been our neighbor for a long time. We've done projects with them on the south and on the east. The connection of their path and our path were done, designed at the same time with the same staff, looking how we're going to get in and out. We need to make a difference between whether or not people are on skateboards versus through Clark Lindsay Village. We didn't prohibit that sort of thing. We just said we need to understand it. Then when you come in on our side of the path, you need to know who we are. Once you know that, it's okay. And if they still have a skateboard, it's okay. It's not going to hurt anybody. They just needed to understand that there's a difference in this piece of the world. And we think the world of the Park District folks. Their extensive conversation with us on how we're going to connect and how we're going to blend, how they're going to upgrade. Some of you may be aware they're planning to do some upgrades in Meadowbrook Park. If you think it's wonderful now, it's going to be terrific in the future. Some things they want to do, and they've shared with us, and they're in the process of doing that right now, and that's okay. We've cooperated with them and discussed with them how will we blend between the two pieces of property and how the neighbors are going to live together, and that's what neighbors ought to do, and that's what we've been doing with the Park District in the past, and we're pleased with that sort of thing. I'm going to comment less specifically on the issues in some respects. I hope you've appreciated, we've enjoyed working with this design team. This has not been an easy, oh, you do this and fix this up and do that. This has been long, and I don't mean that sounds like it's been terrible. It's been fun to deal with how we're going to work with the upgrade, the improvement, the continued extension, something that we've been working now for 35 years, and we're now to the next stage, and we're excited. We're pleased about how this is going to go to work, and this design team, they're good people. They're quality people, and there's, and no offense, you folks haven't raised the question we found as well. We asked the same sort of questions. What are we going to do? How are we going to do that? Those conversations have been long and extensive, and we've enjoyed it. It's been a positive experience. Quite frankly, it's supposed to work that way. The design team and the client is supposed to understand and argue and fuss and fiddle around, and let's think about how we're doing that. And I'm pleased with it. It's been a real positive experience for us as well. This is from a perspective, some of you know, I've lived here in Urbana now since I came here in 1963 to the university. My wife and I live a block north of here on Whitehall Court. My mother died here in Clark Lindsay Village. It's part of life. My wife and I are expected to live at some point in our stage at Clark Lindsay Village. I think it's part of both my family and my personal. It's what we think is part of life here in Urbana. We think it's good and positive, and we ought to deal with that. So the relationship between one of our greatest assets being the Park District, and we think the Park District thinks we're a good asset as well. We need to work together. We need to understand that. And our landscape architect is already working our discussions with the landscape architects from the Park District on how we're going to blend this and how they're going to work with us. They've got a set of all these plans. This is not a surprise to them. They've seen it. I don't know what level and at what time they've dealt with it, but we're pleased with them. They're good neighbors. The collaborative sort of approach, both with the design team and how we're dealing with the neighbors, is exactly the community is supposed to have this sort of thing. You're now at the level of having to look at, the staff has seen our documentation, our materials, etc. We think you'll be proud with what we've done. What we've gotten to the stage we are now, it could be overly stated, but it's hard for me to do that. It's one of the finest facilities of this type in the world. We've contacted some of the finest architects and designers to do this sort of thing. Not just something, not to maximize revenues. That's not it. What we want to do is to continue to have the finest facility of this type in the country. And this is our goal. This was our attempt. That's who we hired, so to speak, to get this, to make it happen. Once again, and I'll say this indelicately, the goal was not to maximize our revenues. That wasn't on the list at all. We want to make this thing right. When we get done with it, quite frankly, I'm going to live there. Hope maybe each of you may want to live there, a place just like that. So we're pleased and proud of what we're doing and what you're doing for you. It's, I think that when we all get done, the community will be pleased and proud of what Clark Lindsay Villages will ultimately wind up with, future in life and the next phase one of this project. And I jokingly suggested with the staff, and I'm almost apologetic in some respects. Well, look at the design that was done, and the Urbana Plan Commission, city staff, etc., worked on this design in the mid-'70s. It's not far different from what we're proposing today if you look at it in concept. I'm pleased and proud of what Urbana and Clark Lindsay Village did to get us to where we are now and where we're likely to go when we think we're getting done. I'm almost stunned by how much it's similar to what we've done in the past. What we're doing. Has the world changed? Many of you remember when we came here in Clark Lindsay Village, there was an oil and ship Township Road on the north side there at Windsor Road. It's different now than it was. It's different than Ray Street And Ray Street's still a fair distance to get where it's ultimately going to be at the end as well. But a lot of things have changed. Things have worked out well. Could we, should have done something different back when we built it back then, and we should have done something different? I suppose we've got decisions like that. We could have, should have, did it. But on the other hand, people made thoughtful, careful decisions, and for the most part, we've been pleased with them and continued with them, and we're happy with them, and we're going to do better. We have a continuing phrase that works with Clark-Lindsay Village, and we can share that with you. However good we are today, we're going to be better tomorrow. We're going to be nicer. We're going to do a better job serving our constituents, our folks here at Clark-Lindsay Village. And so you can count on us. However good we've been, we're going to be better. And that's our goal, and that's our challenge all the way through. I'm particularly pleased both with our internal staff, and I'm just the chairman of the board of directors that I don't get paid anything at all. You can tell me exactly how much I get paid. Zero on all the other board members of the board of directors doing this as a contribution for a place where my mom wanted to live, where you wanted to live, where I want to live. That's the compensation we were always looking for. We're looking for appreciation of a better piece of the world. And this is where hopefully you'll be pleased and proud of us as a better piece of the world be better when we get done with it. Any other question? I can run off. You know, I care about this place.
Questions for Mr. Burns?
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to address the Plan Commission on this case? Do we want to undertake any discussion or go ahead and continue it?
I think there's a problem if we deliberate.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
I mean, I think we should make sure we got all our questions answered.
Well, if no one else wishes to address us on this at this time, and if your questions are satisfied, then we'll continue this to the next Plan Commission meeting, which is
March 7th.
March 7th, Thursday, March 7th.
Okay. So continue the public hearing.
And, yeah, there'd be a public hearing at that time.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. And now, moving on, we've got, is there anybody who wants to, we got another item of new business. Do I open that and continue it, or do we just?
Let's do that. Open it, continue it.
Open it and continue it. Okay. I'm going to open Plan Case 2200 M13, approval of the 2013 zoning map. We don't have a quorum, so we can't approve it, so we'll continue that also to March 7th. Thursday, March 7th, and hold a public hearing on that at that time. Any audience members wish to address the commission on anything other than this case or anything that's on your mind? No? Staff report?
I don't have a staff report for this evening.
No staff report. No study session? We're adjourned.